Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Hope everyone had a healthy, safe, happy holiday season. I know the new year brings new hopes, new ambitions, new wants, new dreams, all of that stuff we will be talking about today. I know myself, every new year I hope, I wish, and I rejuvenate and re-energize around the idea of how do we make the lives of working people better? How do we move policy that's going to make all our lives just a touch better? How are we going to help those kids that grew up kind of like I did achieve success, achieve their American dream? And how do we use policy to do this? I know I have some of my free market friends who go, no, the invisible hand. And yeah, the invisible hand that's been giving us, well, the invisible fist for quite some time. Kind of a problem. And again, you look at this and you go, there's so much that needs to be done policy-wise, so much that we need to be working on. And it starts with democracy, pushing the small d democratic process. We the people coming together. And I'll tell you, over the break, one of the things that really was quite stunning, shocking, one of those things that I spent most of my time thinking about was this article written by a Canadian scholar. This Thomas Homer Dixon is his name. He's the executive director of the Cascade Institute at the Royal Roads University. And, he's saying what, well, a lot of us have been saying for a while. We're heading down a very dangerous path. We're heading into a weird spot where the democracy that we grew up believing possible, the country that we grew up believing that we were, the citizens that we thought we were, we're not. And he wrote this piece to the Canadian government saying, hey, wake up to the reality that those folks on your southern border could very soon be turning into an authoritative, right-wing kind of dictatorship. And this is, again, one of those things that I've been saying for a while now. Be very careful of what happens in these next couple of months, which is why I think what Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are doing, extremely important. There are a couple Republicans left who are going to step forward and go, maybe what happened on January 6th was a bad thing. Maybe we should be holding those people accountable. I wish they would take it a step further and say this has been the path that the Republican Party has been on for decades, that all of this was predictable, that all of this was heading to this moment of overthrowing the institutions that built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. And that is a strong government that protected people's rights. We're in this weird moment right now. And as he says, by 2025, American democracy could collapse, causing extreme domestic political instability, including widespread civil violence. By 2030, he says, if not sooner, the country could be governed by a right-wing dictatorship. And you go, no, that could never happen here. Never happen here. We're now going through a moment. And this is the weird thing. We're now seeing what the past administration was planning. We're now seeing their treason being laid out in front of us. You're now seeing the coup on paper. They wrote it out in a number of places. This is not new. They had PowerPoint presentations. They had numerous people who were pushing for this. And the weird thing is you look at what happened on January 6th, almost a year ago, and you go clear as day. There was violence in the Capitol. It was the administration that was pushing for it. That this was all planned. Steve Bannon saying, all hell's going to break loose. And all of the big lies going on as they're going through Ohio, through Pennsylvania, as they're going through Arizona, Wisconsin, Georgia. And the weird thing is 62% of the country, and this is a hopeful moment for me. 62% of the country saying that Trump shouldn't run again. And that's a huge thing. But you look at the number of people who think that what happened on January 6th was a patriotic thing. I saw a poll that said, 78% of the people that they polled said Trump had little or nothing to do with what happened. There's a disconnect between where the leadership was taking us, and I'm hoping Republicans wake up to this. I know right now the litmus test is do you support the big lie theory? Do you support the Trumpian lie theory? And that's the litmus test to being a Republican today. I'm hoping they wake up over the next several weeks with what hopefully will be coming out about what happened. Now, I fear that we've waited too long. I fear the Democrats were too slow in rolling this out, that the right-wing spin machine has done its magic and has convinced a generation of people that, it was like a walk in the park. It was a peaceful day. But I go back to this Thomas Homer Dixon's piece. And he's saying, look, it's not just him saying this. There are military people in this country fearing potential civil war. And there are polls out there that a number of voters think that inevitably it's going to have to come to that we can't possibly talk to each other, that we're going to have to start shooting. Now, what this guy goes through in a very articulate way, in a very methodical way, he goes, look, this has all happened by design. And I go, this has been the conservative movement from William F. Buckley in the 50s all the way through the Powell Doctrine, all the way through the Powell Memo, all the way through voodoo, supply side voodoo Reaganomics. All of this stuff was plotted out to swing the power and influence of this country away from we the people into the hands of the moneyed interest and the very wealthy. And this is the weird thing. And this is where I have some hope that conservatives, true conservatives, not these these outrage candy right-wing talk radio listeners, but actual conservatives look at what's going on and go, no, this isn't the America we want. We don't want an oligarchy. We don't want a right-wing authoritarian dictatorship. We don't want King Trump or any of the long line of wannabes. And there's tons of them. There are tons of wannabes. But I look at this guy's article, and I highly suggest, we're going to get it out on social media so people can take a look at it. He's telling the people of Canada, you better prepare. You better prepare for crazy. And he goes through how it happened. He goes through how, because of the horrible policies that were moved by the Reagan era, by the neoliberals, by the ultra-conservatives, this pendulum swing of wealth redistribution from the working class to our 1% has caused this kind of instability. The fact that we haven't dealt with income inequality, the fact that we haven't dealt with any of the issues that working class people have faced. And what it did is it gave the Limbaughs of the world an opportunity to go, see, the reason your life isn't what you believed it was going to be, those people had the opportunity to go, it's the immigrants, it's the gays, it's them, it's these, it's that. So not you. No, you're the best, you're the brightest, you're a good, God-fearing American. It's the other. Without understanding that, our country has been a country of others. All of us. But when you have this kind of constant messaging, this kind of constant pounding, that they're bad, and you combine this with an education system that has, well, been privatized and profitized and moved toward not educating good, thoughtful, critical thinking citizens, but little worker bees, just smart enough to push buttons, just smart enough to move papers around, just smart enough to plug something in, and not smart enough to ask why. Why is this the way it is? It's almost like, well, they planned this, and I argue they did. This was the plan all along. Divide and conquer. I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half. Jay Gould on steroids. And this is where we're at. The big moneyed interests have done all they can do to keep stealing from working people while blaming, well, all of the others. And the numbers don't lie. This is where economics matters. The numbers don't lie. The wealth class of this country has gotten bigger and larger, and our policies have enriched them even wilder than they could have imagined. While the people who have went and punched a clock, did what they were told, you work your 40 hours, you put the blood, sweat, and tears in, you're going to do okay. You work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead. That's not true anymore. And that's why I think we've seen all of the labor unrest. We're a country in chaos right now. And it's finally that working people have said enough is enough, that I'm not just happy to have a job anymore, that I actually want to be able to support my children. I actually want to put a roof over their head. And that's a good thing. That's healthy. Now, the weird thing is, and this is where I get arguments from my friends on the right who go, but Rick, it's both the right and the left. The left just as bad. No. You didn't see the left try and overthrow our government. You didn't see the left try and stop the certification of an election. You didn't see the left write up a proposal on how to overthrow an election in a coup attempt. And we certainly didn't see the left doing the things that corporate America has gotten away with. Fundamentally, we're in a weird spot. But I do have hope. I have hope in we the people. I have hope in what's left of our institutions. The reason we didn't have a coup on January 6th is there were military leaders who weren't going to let it happen. The reason it didn't go forward is there were things in place that said no. There are still shreds of institutions left that are going to hold people accountable. And I look at the fact that, today you've got the New York Attorney General's office that subpoenaed Ivanka and Dumb Jr. To testify as part of their civil investigation into the Trump organization. That's a good thing. No, I want them to say, no, we're not going to participate. I want them to go the route that they think they're going to be able to go. But ultimately, our institutions are going to have to hold them accountable. For instance, Liz Cheney, and I brought her up a moment ago, evidently told ABC that Ivanka had asked her father to intervene, call off the supporters, call off the people ransacking the Capitol. Should she be compelled to come in and testify and say that? Evidently, at least twice. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we wake up to what's been tearing us apart. I'm hopeful that we can organize around making a better tomorrow for ourselves and our kids, and we can do the things that need to be done to salvage what is our democracy. That is not a good thing. So lots to get to, lots to talk about today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you as concerned as I am on the front that there could be a real problem with our fundamental institutions, that we could see the last true election. I had this conversation over the break, and this is real quick. I had this conversation over the break with someone who, neither Republican nor Democrat, just somebody who I view as straight down the middle, saying the concerns that he had were that people tinkering with the ballot box, tinkering with the vote, figuring out in some of these Republican states especially how to block people's access to the ballot box, how to stop people from voting. That was his biggest concern. He was of the mindset, and I don't know that I disagree, but he was of the mindset that if people, you and me, we the people, have access to the ballot box, if we vote, and if this becomes something that enough of us stand up, step forward, and speak out and say, hey, we definitely need this, does all this other stuff go away? And his concern was, if Republicans win the day, if they're able to stop people from voting, that this will be the last fair election that we ever have. Outside of all the big lie, outside of all the chaos that we see from Donald Trump and all of the minions, that if we the people don't have access to the ballot box, if they're successful at blocking that, which is why Schumer had better do something to pass some voting rights legislation. He was seriously concerned as an independent. I'm someone who believes everyone should vote as a matter of your basic citizenship. Every person should vote. But you see all the things on the other side, all of the attempts to limit that. It's frightening, not just to me, but to someone I view as fairly centrist. But I have hope. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. When we come back, Philly Inquirer columnist Will Bunch going to be here to share some thoughts on his latest articles. Stick around. Right back after this.
It takes a lot to raise a family. A good job, a good salary, and some patience. A lot of people my age are drowning in college debt, but I chose a different path. I'm a member of the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I work hard for my job, and I love what I do. I had a lot of choices for my future, but I made the best choice for my family. IBEW, the right choice.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over half, I mean, this is the amazing thing here, over half of Republicans in the most recent ABC Ipsos poll that was released on Sunday, 52% said that they believed that the rioters were protecting American democracy. And as I said, I'm concerned about the future of our democratic process. I'm concerned about the future of, well, what I think most of us take for granted, considering that half of the country sees what happened on January 6th as, well, Patriots protecting democracy. Scary, scary stuff. And here to share some thoughts, I've asked Will Bunch to come talk with us. Will is a national columnist for the Philly Daily News. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So what do you make of this when you get, this latest poll? And I know a lot of these polls are, there's a lot to them, but just the fact that over half, 52% in this poll are saying, no, they were protecting democracy. Well,
yeah, it's interesting that because I've seen a lot of polls, maybe not on this exact issue, but polls on similar issues, about what Trump did, about the threat to democracy, about January 6th, particularly about the whole big lie, that the election was stolen, that somehow Biden's victory was fraudulent. And seems like pretty much for the last year since January 6th, we've seen this steady rate of 50 to 60% of Republicans holding this completely wackadoodle, viewpoint that the election was stolen, that they call them the J6 Patriots were trying to save the democracy by storming Capitol Hill and impaling Capitol police officers with flagpoles and whatnot. And I think at some point we have to stop being surprised at poll numbers like this, because we've just seen them now again and again and again. And what it does is it gives us a clear, it gives us a clear picture of how many of our citizens have just gone off the deep end. So if it's 50 or 60% of Republicans, you're talking about, 75 million people voted for Trump. I don't know. You're talking about like 50 million Americans, right? That's a rough ballpark guess, 40, 50 million Americans.
I mean, it's the number's huge.
Yeah.
And when I look at this, there's part of me, Will, that goes, are these people reachable? And in the coming weeks, as we hear more coming out about the investigation, the committee's investigation, and the hearings that are going to happen, at this point, are these people even reachable, or have the Democrats waited so long to lay this stuff out that people are already in their camps?
Well, you make a good point, and I think I wish the Democrats had acted, started this committee sooner, taken more opportunities to have more public hearings to kind of get the basic story of January 6th out there. But I think fundamentally, no matter what the Democrats had done, many of these people would be unreachable because, I grew up a total Watergate geek in the 1970s. I was 13 in 1972 when the Watergate break-in occurred, and those next couple summers when I was 13, 14 years old, I was, one of those weirdo kids who raced home from summer camp to watch John Dean testify in the hearings. And so I remember that time, and you have to understand, I mean, the news media environment was just so much different back then. I mean, people got their news from their local newspaper, which was, had AP stories and whatnot, and from the television newscasts at night, the three networks, CBS, NBC, and ABC. And, as the truth about Richard Nixon's Watergate came out, and the obvious crimes that were committed there, that was what was being presented to the American people. That there was criminal activity. In other words, there was no Fox News in 1973. There was nobody going on the air every night that was watched by, 5 or 10 million people every night, giving the story of why Richard Nixon was innocent and this was all a frame up and the Democrats were just out to get him. That didn't exist back then.
That's a good point.
And it exists now. And I mean, you have people out here who want to believe a story about what feels like the truth to them. And I've spent the last year and a half really trying to take a deep dive into, rather than just being shocked at how angry and resentful some Americans are. I've kind of tried to get to the bottom of why they're so resentful, and I've focused a lot on the whole issue of education, particularly higher education, because I think if you go back in the big sweep of modern history, going all the way back to World War II, I think that's been the big change. At the start of World War II, it's kind of hard to believe, but only 5% of American adults have college degrees. Today, the figure is maybe not as high as people might think it is. It's 37%, but that's still a huge change from 5%, and which has been great for some people in a way. People have had learning opportunities they didn't have 100 years ago. But we've also taken higher education, and we had a chance back then to make it a public good, and instead we privatized it. We priced it out of the reach of most American families unless they took usurious student loans, and made it just pretty much inaccessible to wide swaths of America. And I think that really set up the template for this resentment of certain kinds of elites. I mean, you look at the right wing and who they really hate. It's not millionaires and billionaires. It's not the people who are outsourcing their jobs to China. It's not the people who crushed their labor unions, which were once such a source of support in these communities. It's not those people. It's people like college professors. It's people like journalists like us. It's Hollywood movie stars and actors. It's people that they think are looking down on them. And I mean, the reality is more complicated than that. But so these this resentment has caused them to completely distrust, for example, the news media. And so when the news media reports that the 2020 election was fair and honest, or when the news media tries to report how vaccines were tested and developed, and it's all a big story that these elites are trying to tell you. And these people are just teed up for somebody to come along. I think there was always a fear that a demagogue like Donald Trump could come along and rile up these popular resentments. I think what people didn't anticipate was that there would be an entire First Amendment protected, media enterprise that would support this, that there'd be something like Fox News, that there'd be something like right-wing talk radio and Sean Hannity and all those folks that are still out there.
Or that they would have the power that they have. I mean, these are powerful institutions at this point because they're well funded by the billionaires, the same people who have taken those jobs away. It's an interesting cycle if you think about it, that the Jay Goulds of this era, the ones who said I could pay half the working class to murder the other half, are the ones funding the same kind of things that are going on today, only we don't see it in the same ways that we did in the past.
Right. It's more sophisticated, I guess. And, it is sophisticated. I'm pretty sure that in all the times that you and I have talked, Rick, I'm sure at one point we probably talked about the Powell memo from 1971, in which Lewis Powell, who became a Supreme Court justice, working on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, basically, the millionaire and billionaire, I guess they were millionaires back then, but now billionaire protectors of capitalism. These people felt very threatened. They felt very threatened by the surge in people going to publicly funded state universities that had low tuition, because the more that people got a liberal education, and that term doesn't mean liberal in the political sense, but it means a general sweeping education of how the world works, philosophy, sociology, political science, all of those things. The more that people got that kind of education back in the 60s and 70s, the more dissatisfied they became with the system. And so, you saw this effort to shut this down. And the piece I wrote over the weekend, when you asked me to come on the show, I wrote a piece, and actually I focused a lot on K-12 education, because there's a big court case in Pennsylvania right now about how unfair the K-12 education funding system is in Pennsylvania, and how
and you stepped right on my segue right into that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I stole your segue. Well, I'm sure you would do it better than me, so you can do it.
No, this is where I was going next, because we talk about all these lost opportunities, and one of the things that came out of the hearing in Pennsylvania here was this attorney who asked this question. That over the break, I had spent a lot of time going, this is what they've always believed, and this attorney, John Krill, He was questioning this superintendent from a very rural school, and he simply asked, "What use would a carpenter have for biology? What use would someone on the McDonald's career track have for Algebra 1?" And that's always been the elite view of working class children. I mean, back
Right.
in the 1880s,
Yeah.
there was a wealthy guy who said, "I've seen children spoiled for work because of too much education. They're not going to want to go into the mines and the factories and work the long hours and the brutishly short lives." This is who they've always been. So I wasn't
Right.
surprised when the question was asked.
Yeah, I mean, John Krill is the classic example of saying the quiet part out loud. For a while, I think Republicans have gotten pretty good about keeping the quiet part quiet, even though many of us knew what was going on. But here he is in court admitting that they think that some kids should be on the McDonald's track, and they want to create a system of education in which they create people who learn just enough to do working class jobs but don't learn too much to question the whole system. And unfortunately, I think they've done pretty well in that mission. They have. When you look at the system that we've had the last generation or so, all the effort's been on drilling and testing kids in a couple of areas, reading and mathematics, and completely losing subjects that are really, excuse me, that are really just so important in our modern world. Science, biology and science was focused on in this court case, but the one that I think is huge that went unmentioned is civics. Civics, you call it by whatever name you want to, but learning about
Yeah, basic high school government. Now, I've been talking about this for years. I mean, the fact that you didn't have the same kind of, my kids didn't have the same kind of classes that I had. I had a couple, I think three government or civics or classes along those lines to help you become active, engaged, thoughtful citizens and participating in democracy and voting and all of those things that my kids unfortunately didn't get.
Yeah, I mean, this whole concept that you go to one of the reasons that you go to school and get an education is so you can become a citizen someday, that so you can take part in the voting process and learn how to be an informed voter. I mean, this was something that leaders, used to believe in 75 years ago, and it just totally dropped from the conversation altogether. And
Because we need worker bees, Will. We don't
yeah,
need critical thinkers. We need worker bees. We need people, as George Carlin used to say, just smart enough to run the machines and do the work,
yeah.
but not smart enough to ask why they're getting screwed over.
Exactly. And the less you understand about how the system is supposed to work, and the less you understand about civics and government, it just stands to reason that the more susceptible you're going to be to the big lie. I wrote a couple pieces in the last couple days about January 6th, so of course I'm starting to get some pushback on social media from various trolls, and the things that they're saying to me are just so illogical about how Biden wasn't elected with the proper constitutional process, or what. I mean, these people obviously don't know what the proper constitutional process is, and I always want to be careful in this. I mean, I'm not, there's a certain worldview that, like, oh, these people are just so dumb, and what, they're deplorables, and what are we going to do about them? I mean, I think it's more complicated than that. I mean, I think we should acknowledge. I mean, it is unfortunate, and it's a complicated thing. I mean, people are somewhat responsible for their own choices about how much they want to educate themselves. That's true. I mean, I do believe that, but I also believe the system is more important. And if the system isn't giving kids a chance from the start, if it's deciding in fifth grade that Joe over here is on the McDonald's track, but Jack over here is on the is going to work for Elon Musk someday. If we're treating our kids that way, it's going to filter out through society. I mean, if you look at the society we have right now, I mean, to me, the most dominant emotion in our society is resentment.
No, you're absolutely right.
Resentment of elites. And so that didn't come from nowhere. That came from something. I wrote this book. It's called Resent You period, like in university. But it looks at the role that higher education has played in causing this resentment. It comes out in August. But it looks at the role higher education has played in causing resentment in our politics, which is the root of our whole political divide, which is the root of January 6th and the big lie and all these other things that have happened. And I mean, my sense is, if you really want to fix these problems, it's way too messed up now to fix it overnight. But if you want to start to try and fix these problems, you've got to fix education. You've got to be creative. And, I have a whole chapter in my book about majorly expanding to universal national service, where kids at age 18 would, millions of kids would have an opportunity to do a gap year where they could, join with kids from other backgrounds that they wouldn't meet normally and work on projects like climate-related projects or.
Yeah, we definitely need something that's going to pull. We definitely need something that's going to pull the country back together, and I can't wait till the book comes out. But I agree with you, absolutely. Education should be one of the first places we start. And then I would argue we need to have jobs for people that, even if they are on the McDonald's track, that those jobs have dignity, respect of a decent wage, and a future and all that. But Will, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Love the work that you do. We'll get some links out on social media of your most recent articles. As always, great stuff.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Appreciate the time. Our good friend Will Bunch. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure we check out our social media on Twitter @RickSmithShow. You can check out some of Will's articles. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing, because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage. Was real difficult to make a living. And then the Teamsters pushed a lot, so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind, the union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over the weekend, I got to look at Rand Paul's tweet, and you got to love Rand Paul. Always something ludicrous. He tweeted out an American Conservative article that I found interesting. They were talking about Wisconsin and how Democrats stole the election. They stole the election by going out and convincing voters that, hey, you should vote for our ideas. They went out and they registered voters. They got people to get their ballots and get them turned in. Somehow in conservative land, in American conservative world, that is what they consider stealing an election. What I would call good old-fashioned retail politics. Get out there and sell on your ideas. The one who's got the best ideas wins, right? The most people who get to the polls and cast their ballot wins. Yeah, evidently to conservatives, that's a theft of an election. Wow. But I'll tell you, I'm happy that Chuck Schumer is going to be moving forward on something with the filibuster, hopefully, so we can get some voting rights stuff done so that everyone has the chance to vote. And here to share some thoughts on, well, did they steal Wisconsin by convincing voters that you should vote for us? I don't think so, but here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked our good friend Jeff Hauser to come talk with us. Jeff is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project at the Center for Economic Policy Research. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Love to be here.
So walk me through your thoughts on this. Rand Paul seems to think that this is theft. The American Conservative magazine, this is theft. How dare they go out and convince people that their ideas are good and that they should get a ballot and they should return it? How dare they?
I mean, this is the story of the last two generations of the Republican Party. The story becomes purer and more clear over time, but for the last 50 years, a Democrat as president is seen as fundamentally illegitimate by Republicans. When Jimmy Carter took over, he was dismissed as a fluke. And he was, he did benefit from, being after Richard Nixon and all, but of course, Richard Nixon is the cause of Richard Nixon's demise. And it accelerated with Bill Clinton, who may not be by any means my favorite Democrat, but who clearly won fair and square in 1992, was never treated as such by the establishment in Washington, D.C., especially Republicans, but not limited to Republicans. And they viewed him as illegitimate, and they told crazy conspiracy theories about drug money in Arkansas and murder rings and the like. And it accelerated, of course, with the first Black president in America's history, Barack Obama. And Donald Trump, has, further made the base crazy. But Rand Paul is also the inheritor of Ron Paul's crazy email, originally physical mail newsletter, gold bug, conspiratorial, right-wing nuttiness. And so that's just more and more what the Republican Party is. But in that worldview, the only way that Democrats can win is to cheat, because it's deemed that they are fundamentally a party. The QAnon conspiracy is taken for granted on the far right. And so how could people want to vote for such a party? There has to have been theft.
Never mind the fact that, they got 7 million more votes in the last election. What was it, 3.5 million in the election before? And, here in Pennsylvania, generally more than a million, there are more than a million registered Democrats than there are Republicans. But somehow, going out and trying to get those folks to cast a ballot, somehow that's cheating.
Yeah, I mean, because it's just, they devalue the status of the type of people who vote for Democrats. Obviously, a lot of that surrounds the fact that the Democratic Party is the overwhelming choice of African Americans in this country. Some of it's that they dismiss in all sorts of different ways, be it as LGBTQ or what have you. They just don't count as fully American Democratic voters. They attack unions, you name it. They do not value as fully American the type of people who tend to vote for the Democratic Party. And so that is how you have to come to grasp. I mean, it's got to be hard to support the party that has lost 7 of the last 8 presidential elections by the popular vote. I mean, that's a pretty strong trend. If you lost 7 out of 8 in something else, like if the Philadelphia Eagles lose 7 of 8 games, they want to fire the coach. The Republican Party isn't going to fire their coaches, so they have to claim the game is rigged.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Now, I look at the story that came out today that Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, is looking to do something on the voting rights. He says by January 17th, if they don't do that, they're looking at possibly changing something with the filibuster. Any thoughts on this?
I mean, I think Schumer recognizes what he is up against, and I think he is doing his best. He has a very weak hand here. He needs 50 out of 50 Senate Democrats on board. Slowly but surely, a lot of the mediocre Senate Democrats, for lack of a better term, have come around on filibuster reform, at least for voting rights related cases. But I mean, has Joe Manchin, has Kirsten Sinema? I am hopeful. I don't know what can be done. I am not sure what either of them want to do in the near future.
Right.
Does Joe Manchin want to run for re-election? I don't know. Does Joe Manchin want to get really rich? Not that he isn't rich already. That might be appealing. If he wants to get even richer, I don't know what the right course of action is. I don't know what without like some really criminal stuff, I don't know what Biden or Schumer can offer that can trump what they Manchin might see on the other end. And
No, excellent point.
Kirsten Sinema, who spent her August recess interning at a private equity or a hedge fund owned winery, like God only knows what her vision of her future is, and is it even running for reelection as a Democrat. So I hope they're doing their best. History, if we still have it in the future, will remember what Manchin and Sinema decide, but I don't have any real sense of what that is going to be.
Now the weird thing is that Manchin had a voting rights plan that wasn't horrible. I mean, there were some things in there that I thought were good, the things that we need. He honestly says he believed that they were going to get to the cloture vote. They were going to get to the 60 votes with what he had proposed. And and correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't get one Republican to vote for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like at times Murkowski has said positive things, and like I don't know exactly if she'll vote under the right scenario would provide a vote. But yes, but 1 is certainly not 10, and the path from 1 to 2 is actually like almost unpassable. From 2 to 10 is inconceivable. So yeah, I think Manchin is stuck between the fact that I do think he believes in democracy for reform. I have no idea what Kirsten Sinema believes, so I won't even express an opinion. I think Manchin's probably substantively on the right place, but I think he really is dug in on the filibuster. And no matter how stupid the filibuster is and what a historical anomaly it is, I think we can't assume that everyone is in bad faith. Their arguments might be dumb, but lots of people hold dumb opinions. I do think Manchin believes in this view, and I hope to heck somebody can be persuasive with him.
Yeah, I mean, because on the voting rights part of this, this is one of those things that something really needs to be done, because if not, I think some of my more independent thinking friends who aren't politically on either side are going, this could be the last free and fair election, given the fact that a lot of states have put up major barriers that even my middle of the road friends are uncomfortable with.
Yes, I mean, so there's access to the polls issues, which have gotten steadily worse in the last 10 to 15 years, which is atrocious. That is something that historically had only gotten better over time. I mean, the ballot was only restricted to upper class white men at the founding of the country, and over time it kept expanding, and that was supposed to be the inexorable progress of America, and that's obviously been backsliding. There are other related issues that I think somewhat distinct issues actually about local officials just rejecting election results, and obviously we're all like living in fear that the 2024 election, you could see a Democrat win by as much or more than they did in 2020, and yet a serious effort to steal the results. And I think significant actions in the interim potentially occurring as denialist MAGA Republicans run for all sorts of obscure local offices and get installed increasingly in state offices. I mean, like you look at the people in Georgia, those Republicans who ran the election process, are they good on democracy issues? No, they're terrible. But they're like significantly better than Trump, which is why they stood up to Trump. Like there was a level below which they would not go. Yeah. And those people are now being primaried and ridden out of the Republican Party by Trump. So yeah, I am worried about the 2022 elections, and between both the slow degrading of access to the ballot and the difficulty in ensuring that whoever gets the most ballots, even after a restricted access, does the person who get the most votes win? It's hard to know for sure.
Yeah, especially with all the stuff that we're seeing coming out in writing. There are PowerPoints and there are memos, and there's all this stuff where they were very open and honest about it. And I guess this is one of those things when they feel they've got the upper hand and they've got the power to impose their will. They don't try and hide it.
Absolutely, and I think there's long been a belief that Republican elected officials are less crazy than their public-facing rhetoric. And I think like Joe Manchin is one of those people who believes that.
No.
And I think some of this is because Republican electeds code shift. They talk rational-ish many of them, not all, increasingly fewer, but still many Republicans know how to talk to a person like a Joe Manchin or a Mark Warner or a Chris Coons and sound not crazy. And I think a lot of Democrats think that is the true person. And so when they're ranting and raving about stolen elections and caravans coming to take over the country from Central America through Mexico, I think they think, oh, that's just them doing the politics. I think increasingly it's the opposite. I think it's that these people genuinely are crazy Looney Tunes people who watch Fox or the even crazier OAN and Newsmax and the like. I think a lot of those people, like, those are actually the elected officials now. And that's really, really dangerous.
Yeah, it's all about saying the outside all the things you're saying inside. All the cloakroom talk that you're whispering, they now shout from the mountaintop, which is scary stuff. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show, or with Jeff Hauser. Jeff's the executive director of the Revolving Door Project at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. The revolvingdoorproject.org is the website. We'll get links out on social media. You can check out some of that. I did want to get some of your thoughts on outside of the voting rights, which I think has to happen. They cannot go into March, April without getting that done. But I think the Build Back Better thing stuff has to come back. I think they need to get something passed through. There's some chatter possibly. What are you hearing in D.C. of the possibility that that's going to make a comeback?
I think we're going to get to a point where something is going to happen. The entire process is artificial, actually, because of the filibuster. So what happens is that there are essentially 2 reconciliation opportunities a year. And the reconciliation is just a fancy way for economically significant legislation for which you have majority rule in the Senate, as opposed to needing 60 votes. And since basically nothing can get 60 votes, those are the only moving packages. And that really makes legislating very difficult because you need 50 out of 50 Democrats to agree, and you're trying to combine things in which, like, Joe Manchin you may be able to get a better bill that Joe Manchin agrees to on some issues than Sinema, and Sinema may be better on some issues than Manchin. And normally you would just break it up and have different votes, and honestly, on some aspects, you might even get a Republican or two. Mitt Romney has an oddly good child tax credit idea. It may not be perfect, but like, you might be able to do it if you had a series of 50 vote opportunities. Right. It would be a lot easier than trying to squish all these issues together. Like, Manchin's a little bit better on taxes than Sinema. Sinema cares a little bit more about the climate than Manchin. So, like, it is a genuinely difficult thing. I think, unfortunately, what's going to happen is that Manchin and Sinema are going to have the power that maybe they always had all along, which is they're going to basically look at every idea that Biden believes in, and they're going to say, these are the ones we like, and that's what Build Back Better is going to become. And Build Back Better is going to be, in this scenario, it's going to pass. It's going to be a good bill. It will not be anywhere near what the country needs on a host of different issues. And I think we're just going to have to accept that we need to elect better senators if we want better outcomes.
Ultimately, that's the end of this. We're going to have to elect better people into these positions. But I look at Sinema, and I knew, several years back, I had people telling me, no, she's the gold star of the progressive movement. And I'm going, I don't know her that well to give her that title, but she doesn't look like that to me now.
I mean, I know some people who knew her like way back in the day in terms of like lefty politics. And the sense one gets is that she's just a very strange and super ambitious person. And so she is like seriously shifted from being, in some ways a commendable story, because she definitely grew up much more economic duress than most successful politicians in this country, which obviously is a good thing. And she was a Green Party lefty activist who talked a very strong egalitarian economic message. And she got into the state legislature in Arizona and like started seeing what her path forward could be. and saw that as reaching out to affluent communities. And she has done that extremely successfully. Mark Kelly in Arizona has shown that while maybe it's a tough state so far for like a genuinely, seriously progressive Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren Democrat to win at this moment, although maybe they could. I tend to think they could. But Mark Kelly, he's not that, but he's also not Kyrsten Sinema.
Right.
So why Sinema has not moved back to a progressive stance, given that Mark Kelly has shown you can win in Arizona that way, I don't know. But something is in it for her.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And I'm hopeful that we can move both of those pieces of legislation. So come election time, we can move in a better direction. Jeff, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing your expertise. Thanks so much. I look forward to talking to you again here in the new year.
Yep, definitely. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend Jeff Hauser. Make sure you check out their website at therevolvingdoorproject.org. We'll get links out on social media. I can check that out. Quick break right back after this. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.